Do not tip that old potting soil into the trash can. That bag cost you around $18, and there is one thing missing from it. One cheap mineral that should have been in every bag you ever bought. The two most expensive things in that pot never wore out at all, and they are still sitting down there. Without that one mineral, the peat around them has turned waterproof. Fine clay, not the fancy kind. Plain subsoil clay, the heavy stuff 18 inches under your own yard. Here is the 10-second test that tells you whether your soil has this problem, and then I will show you what happens when the same old mix is treated with fine clay. Your test is tonight, and it takes 10 seconds. Walk out to a pot that has been sitting since last season. Push your thumb into the surface, drip a little water onto the dry part, and watch it. If the drop beads up and sits there like rain on a waxed car hood, instead of sinking in, that soil has turned waterproof. Here is the strange part. Fresh sphagnum, pulled straight out of a bog, drinks water like a towel. Dry it out once and it scores 122 degrees on the same waterproofing scale that makes a waxed jacket shed rain. Past 90 is water repellent. Your old potting soil has turned more waterproof than the coat you wear outside. A 2021 agronomy study put a number on what happens after it dries. Moist, their peat mix took in 60% of its own volume and water. Dried out, the same mix took in 11%. The water also stopped traveling through the root ball and started running down the outside of it, along the wall of the pot, straight out the hole in the bottom. Which is the exact thing you stood there watching last August, wondering what you had done wrong. That channeling is why you can water an old pot 3 times in a row and still pull out a root ball that is bone dry in the center. The water never gets in. It wraps around the outside and leaves. The expensive half of that bag is untouched. Perlite is volcanic glass, heated in a furnace until it popped like corn. Vermiculite is a mica, the flaky golden stuff you see in the bag. Both of them are geology. Neither one has any idea a year went by. Vermiculite holds 3 to 4 times its own weight in water, and it is still down there, fully functional, surrounded by peat that will not let the water reach it. Fine clay fixes it. But there are 2 clays you could reach for, and the expensive one barely works at all. Go looking for a cure for waterproof soil, and the shelves have an answer waiting. Buy a wetting agent. And there is a version of this where you go one better and buy the premium clay, the bentonite, the one the bag brags about, because it holds more water than any other clay on earth. Both of those are the wrong answer, and the research is unusually blunt about why. Take the wetting agents first. They do work, and every bagged mix already has one stirred in, which is one reason a brand new bag behaves so beautifully, and a year-old one does not. But repeated application of those same wetting agents has been measured, turning into a source of water repellency all by itself. You can spend a season fixing the problem into place. The bentonite result is the one nobody expects. German researchers put several different clays through the same test and measured how fast each mix took water back on. Kaolin and Elite, the plain cheap clays, noticeably improved the re-wetting. The bentonite barely improved it at all. The reason matters. The cheap clays work by physically coating each peat fiber in a thin mineral shell that turns the surface from waterproof to water-loving. Bentonite does not coat. It swells in place, and the peat around it stays waterproof. You pay more, and the peat never notices. The thing that actually works is the plainest material in this entire story. In a 5-gallon pot, roughly a third of a cup of fine clay powder doubled how much water that mix took up in 15 minutes. 2 cups in the same pot took it to 5 times. Not a slight improvement. Not 30%. 5 times. In the same trial, the same clay, screened coarse about the size of coarse sand, did nothing measurable whatsoever. Same mineral, same rock, same pot. Ground to dust, it transforms the mix. Left as grit, it may as well be gravel. That single detail is why almost nobody stumbles onto this by accident, because the natural thing to do with a lump of clay is toss the lump in. Here is what the powder is actually doing inside that pot. Every particle of fine clay draws a thin film of moisture to its surface, and those films connect, forming a continuous water network, through the root zone. Water can no longer channel past the roots and out the bottom. It is caught and held at every point. A lump has one surface. 2 cups of powder has millions. That is the entire difference. One thing to know about those numbers: the published trials were done on fresh peat, not on last year's potting soil. The evidence suggests the effect works harder on old decomposed peat because decomposition makes the water repellency worse, but nobody has published the exact trial on a used mix. The numbers on fresh peat are clear, and they are not small. Now you know what fixes it, and you know what does not. Here is why nobody told you. The industry never stopped believing in the clay. In 1 year alone, European substrate plants ran 200,000 tons of it through their mixers, 130,000 of those in Germany. It is still going into the mixes professional growers buy on pallets. It simply stops before it reaches the shelf where you shop, because you are the customer who pays the freight and never sees the invoice. Loam is heavy, clay is heavy. Peat is the lightest thing you can grow a plant in. When the trade swapped one for the other, the reason in the literature is exactly that plain. Loam was expensive to ship, and peat weighed almost nothing. The Dutch certification people have put a figure on it. Adding clay bumps the weight of every bag by 10 to 20%, and every bag costs real money to put on a truck. Before that shift, a bag of growing mix contained loam, peat, and sand with mineral clay running through all of it. It was heavy. The clay was built into the recipe. Today, that bag weighs 18 pounds, and it is nearly all peat. The clay is gone. You are paying more for less material, and the material you are getting is the one that fails first. In October of 1948, a professor named Anton Frühsdorfer filed a patent in Germany for something nobody had thought was patentable. Not a machine, not a chemical, a recipe for dirt. German patent number 832897. The claim is almost comically plain. Take subsoil clay or loam, the heavy stuff from well below the dark layer, practically free of anything living. Crush it. Mix it thoroughly through loosened peat, roughly 1 part to 1. Screen the whole thing so nothing bigger than about 1/3 of an inch gets through. Add a few handfuls of fertilizer. That is the invention. The English came up with a different recipe in the 1930s, published it in 1938, and gave it away free for the wartime Dig for Victory campaign, so ordinary people could grow food. 60% loam, 25% peat, the rest coarse sand. The English went one way. Frühsdorfer went the other. He kept the mineral in, and he put more in. Germany has sold his mixture ever since under a name that translates as unit soil, and the clay content runs between 6 and 20 pounds in every cubic foot. The bags in the aisle at your garden center are the other branch of that argument. Nobody ever told you there had been an argument. That is the history. Here is everything else your old pot needs, because clay is only half the job. The nutrients are the easy half. Phosphate and potassium drain out of containers first, and a $5 bag of balanced fertilizer or a couple inches of good compost puts all 3 back. Together with the clay, that handles any pot that has been sitting 1 or 2 seasons. Not all old soil is the same, and this is the part most people get wrong when they try to reuse a pot. 1-year-old mix with visible perlite and fiber needs only clay and food. A 2 or 3-year-old mix that has gone soft and lost its texture has also lost airspace. Fresh mix is roughly half air by volume, and after 2 or 3 seasons, much of that air has been squeezed out by the slow collapse of the peat. That mix needs a handful of fresh perlite mixed in alongside the clay, because the clay cannot rebuild AIR pockets that the peat has already closed. If the original bag was a quality mix with real perlite and vermiculite, that mineral scaffold is still there. If it was a cheap bag with nothing but shredded bark and peat, the structure was never there to begin with, and the clay alone cannot build what was missing. 2 exceptions. If last year's tomato had blight, or the basil went down with fusarium, that soil carries it forward. Set it aside for ornamentals that are not in the same family. And if the mix has gone to pure mush, no visible texture left at all, compost the remains and start fresh. Now the clay itself, and this part may cost you nothing. If you have the right soil under your yard, you are putting back the one thing that that was taken out of the bag before it ever reached you. Not every property has it. Sandy coastal lots, rocky hilltops, and filled suburban land may have no clay horizon at all. The way to find out is to dig. Pick a spot along a fence line or behind a shed. Go down through the dark, crumbly topsoil and keep going. Around 12 to 20 inches, the color changes and the texture gets heavy under the spade. That is your subsoil. If you hit sand or gravel or solid rock, your yard does not have usable clay, and you will need to source it. Take the clay from depth rather than from the garden bed. The specification the German mixes are built on says the clay should come from the subsoil, where biological activity is low. Stay clear of the drip line of any house or shed that carried lead paint, and stay away from anywhere you suspect things were dumped or treated. If your property has no clay, a 50-pound bag of kaolin or ball clay from a pottery supply runs around $10 to $15, and it is the same mineral the published trials used. That is still a fraction of replacing the soil. Think about what you are holding. This is the mineral Frühstorfer ground into his patent in 1948. The same one European growers still put through their mixers by the hundreds of thousands of tons. You are putting it back with a shovel and a kitchen sieve. Whether you dug it or bought it, test it before you use it. Break a lump off, drop it in a jar of water, and leave it 10 minutes. Good clay holds together as crumbs, softening but staying in pieces. Bad clay collapses into a smooth mud with nothing left in it. If it turns to mud, walk 20 feet and dig again. Check it for lime while you are standing there. Pour a splash of household vinegar on a wet lump and watch closely. If it fizzes, that clay carries chalk in it, and it will push your pots too alkaline, so leave it and find another spot. Now dry it properly, because this is where most people give up, and I will not pretend this part is quick. Spread it thin on a tarp or an old baking sheet and leave it in the sun for a couple of hot days until it goes pale and hard and crumbles when you press it. Break it up. Push it through a kitchen sieve or a piece of window screen stapled to a frame. What falls through is the powder you want. What stays on top goes back on the garden. Then mix it in and mix the whole pot. Tip the entire thing out into a wheelbarrow, because the bottom third is always worse than the top, and working something into the surface never reaches it. Scatter roughly 1 to 2 rounded cups of your powder through a 5-gallon pot. Turn it through until you cannot see streaks of it anymore, and wet it down as you go. One warning, and take it seriously, because more is worse here. Clay lowers the amount of water a plant can easily pull back out, and it ties up some of the phosphate. Growers use it deliberately to keep plants compact. 2 cups in a 5-gallon pot puts you where the published trials are strongest. Some commercial nurseries add clay on purpose at higher doses to keep plants short and compact for shipping. So the effect is real and it goes in both directions. Half a bucket makes a brick, and you will be the man in the comments telling everybody this does not work. Use fresh mix for seed trays. Reuse everywhere else. Do not bake old soil either. Sterilizing kills everything and leaves a vacuum for whatever opportunist lands next. One real caution almost nobody in gardening mentions. Legionella longbeachiae lives in potting mix and causes Legionnaire's disease. The risk is highest for older gardeners, for smokers, and for anyone whose lungs are already compromised. The transmission goes hand to face, not through a mask. Wet the mix before you disturb it and wash your hands before you eat or drink. Symptoms take up to 10 days, which is why nobody connects the two. Now step back, because the math on this will change the way you look at every pot you own. The glass and the mica in that pot are geology. They were old before there were gardens, and they will outlast you. The food is a handful of fertilizer. The structure comes back with 2 cups of powder off your own land. And the first time you water a treated pot, the surface goes dark evenly, not the channels and pale patches you watched last August. That is how you know. If you grow in 10 pots and you have been replacing the soil every year, that is $180 a year carried to the curb. 3 years of that is over $500, replaced by a handful of fertilizer and 2 cups of clay off your own land. If you want the complete seasonal ratios, for restoring used soil. What to put back in spring, what to leave until autumn, and what to never mix in the same year, that is inside the Amish garden system below. The mineral that could have kept that pot working disappeared because it made every pallet heavier. The next time you stand over that trash can with a pot in your hands, you will know what is in there and what it is worth, because you dug the answer up yourself, which is how this used to work. And once your pots are handled, there is the other half of the year. When the beds are asleep and there is nothing green in the house for 4 months, there is a way to grow food with no soil at all, no sunlight, and a 5-minute setup in a plastic trash can in a dark corner. 40 times the nutrition of what you buy in the store. That one is on the screen now.